Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome to the Wheeler Centre's The F Word. This evening we're going to be talking about feminism and parenting. This is the sixth event it's the seventh actually, I'm behind myself. It's the seventh event in our F Word series. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation and to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'm Maxine Beneba Clarke and I'll be your host for this evening. We have some incredible guests here, as always. On the far end, we have Rachel Power. Rachel is a freelance writer, editor and artist. She has contributed to many publications including Mamma Mia, The Big Issue, Kill Your Darlings and The Age. She's worked as a court illustrator for Channel 9, a production editor for Arena magazine, and is currently communications manager for the Australian Education Union, Victoria. Rachel is the author of Alison Refish, A Life for Art, The Divided Heart, Art and Motherhood and Creativity. And we'll be talking about one of those books in our discussion today. It's also for sale with readings at the back, so we'll come back to that. Please welcome Rachel. Next we have Liz Shield. Liz is a queer, feminist, activist, social worker and radio announcer on community station 3CR. She's a volunteer management collective member of Flat Out, a feminist organisation that has been supporting criminalised women in Victoria for 25 years. Liz has blogged for Fem Galaxy and Plan to Thrive, and she has self-published a number of zines over the past 12 years, including Not Another Zine and most recently Tick My Box. Please welcome Liz. And then we have Zakia Baig. Zakia arrived in Australia in 2006 as an overseas student and one among thousands of Hazaras who left their homes to escape persecution in Pakistan and Afghanistan. A mother of two, Zakia is a human rights activist and executive director of the Australian Hazara Women's Friendship Network. Please welcome Zakia. So I'm really excited about this topic. You know, some of the topics in the F Word series I don't know anything about, but this one I went, I'm a parent, you know. But of course, you know, when I told my son that I was going to be on a panel about parenting, he started snickering to himself. I thought what we'd do was begin by asking the panellists about their journey to feminism. When you first became aware that feminism was a thing, were there strong feminist role models in your lives, or was it a concept that you came to kind of later on in life? And I'll start with you, Rachel.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my mother I was raised by a single mother, and she was the head of the nurses union in the federal branch when I was growing up. So in a way I was steeped in the reality on the ground for women working in a female-dominated industry. So I always used to joke that I grew up on the picket line, and pretty much that's the case. So in a way, though we probably, my mother, neither of my parents went to university. They weren't sort of theoretical at that point in the way they talked to me about feminism. I just feel that growing up with a mother who was such a strong activist just meant that I was raised with those issues sort of ingrained in me from a young age. So it probably wasn't until I was a bit older that I actually understood feminism at a more academic level, but it all made sense to me very, very easily.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Liz?
I went to an all-girls school, and there were lots of things that I didn't like about going to an all-girls school, but one thing that I probably didn't realise how significant it was until later was that, you know, the headmistress and all of our teachers were women, and so I never got any messages that, you know, women couldn't do science or maths or any of those things. And our houses, like the house groups at school, were all named after famous women, like Austen, Barrett, Nightingale. And so some of them I didn't even know who they were, so I actually went and looked it up in the library because that's what kind of student I was. And it was, you know, people don't always point out to you, these are significant women in history. These are women who've done these amazing things and made a difference. So in that way, I do think it was the experience of going to that school that, you know, maybe that, like you said, the academic side of it and the actual name feminism would have come later. But I felt very supported at that school. And yeah, I think I learnt a lot about strong women.
Mm-hmm. What about yourself, Zakia?
I grew up in Pakistan, and it was back 1964 born. That time now, Pakistan was more tribal system, so nobody could decide for themselves for their lives. So, and in a male-dominant community, women were always at the back of men, so they didn't have a right to come stand even by side of men. So when I was a little child, I just started noticing that why things are different for me and not for my brother. Yeah. And then fortunately, I have a good father, a feminist parent father, and he always said that you don't worry, you know, you're not a girl, you are a boy, and your brother is a boy, you both are a boy. So I said, no, I am a girl, I'm not a boy. So these kind of questions were always provoking me to just rebel, stand up, and to say something against this. And I started playing with boys. I said, no, I'm not going with girls. I will play with boys. I loved challenging them. I loved wrestling with them. I loved fighting with them. And that just made me a feminist personality. And then I joined, organizations that would work for girls for their education. And that was very early in 1981, 82, and I was 17 or 16. And then I saw Benazir Bhutto, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I used to see female rulers like Margaret Thatcher, Mother Teresa. I would always question myself, if they could do things good, better than men, why there is a discrimination against women in my community? So we are not different from any other women. Yeah, that made me a strong person.
It's interesting, this being a parenting panel, the common thread seems to be that there was some kind of circumstance with all of you where, you either had strong women around you or you had circumstances where that it made feminism a possibility, or it made it not a strange thing. It wasn't a concept that you came to later in life. What I want to talk to next, I guess, is about the pre-child you. Rachel has a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. Liz in the centre has a 2-year-old. And Zakia has a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old. So we're all at different stages. I myself have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. So we've got from 2 to 24. And, having children, it's such a changing moment in your life. And I often think about the pre-child Maxine. I think, oh my gosh. Do you all feel that there has been a big change since becoming a parent?
Oh, how could there not be? Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was easily the most dramatic and transformative change that I've been through in life. And I suppose in terms of my interest then in writing about the impact on creativity and artists as parents, I went straight into a job at 17. I became a journalist and I worked on a newspaper as a cadet. And, I had the odd experience. I mean, you walk into an industry like that, it was still very traditional then, it was still very blokey, and there were the old curmudgeonly, dudes who thought they could talk to you in whatever way they liked because you were the 17-year-old copy girl. So I was, I'd experienced a bit of, the kind of sexism that all girls have to grow up with. But it wasn't really until I'd had children that I realised there was this other sort of layer of disadvantage for women that wasn't about that really overt sexism. For me, I've got a great partner who's very supportive, who would consider himself a feminist, but I was still shocked at the way our roles just divided at the point at which we had a child in the house. And some of that was by choice, obviously, because I wanted to be an involved mother who, you know, breastfed and did those things that basically require you to be at home for a period of time. But it's such a fraught situation, because it's the point at which, well, in a heterosexual couple, your roles can kind of stop resembling each other. Your days can be very different. There can become a sort of lack of understanding around, and even a horrible kind of competitiveness about who's having the toughest time of it, you know. So, yeah, I was kind of shocked by that. I mean, apart from just the general shock about the way babies just eat time and you've suddenly got no time for anything else, I was also kind of surprised by just the impact on, on my sense of equality, I suppose, with my partner.
What was your experience, Liz?
Well, probably significantly, the first thing is the truck-size holes in my brain, where I'm finding it harder to remember my pre-child life, and it was only 2 years ago, but I'm like, what was it like? And, you know, I was busier in a different kind of way. Like, I would do a lot more stuff by myself. That's a thing, by myself. And I would catch public transport, I would ride my bike, obviously not on the public transport, and I used to take dancing classes, you know, weekly, and I would go out dancing on the weekend and eating out, you know, in places where they frown at children and they're surly and they go, no, we don't have a high chair. You know, I'd be like, fine, I don't need one. So these kind of memories that I have of this life, you know, they come back to me sometimes, and I think, oh, that's right. But, you know, that's not to say that I don't like my life now, because something I really noticed after I had Clancy was, you know, I'd be at home all day. Like, babies do just eat your time. Suddenly you think, oh, what have I been doing all day? Just breastfeeding? It's 5 o'clock? And I loved it. I loved it. I guess I slowed down a lot, and I would say to people, I can't believe that having a baby has actually made me feel more peaceful, you know, because that's not what I expected. I expected stress and, you know, I don't know, it was a different kind of pace for my life, and I have to do things completely differently now, but it's brought something more peaceful to my life that I definitely didn't have before having her, and that's true.
Yeah, because of the circumstances I used to be in, so I always wanted to be a mother. Even I was not a mother, but I exercised my motherhood with my brothers. So yeah, I was a mother by birth, like. So when I had my own children, so it was not difficult for me. But of course, in communities, in the systems that we grew up, so we have male partners. They not very much helpful with raising children. So you do by yourself. You do take care of the things at home, and you go out to work. I was a primary school teacher too, so I used to take my child, newly born child, with me to the school and do the breastfeeding, and come back and cook and clean and then start again the life. It was harder for me, because my brothers, my siblings were not that little, so they were grown up as small children, but the infants that we take with us to schools and come back and work at home, it's very hard when you have not very cooperative or helping partner with you, because it's the community that make them like be bossy or things like that, you know. They feel not comfortable going and take care of children in front of their family, their mother, their sister, you know. They feel ashamed that how can I remember that my husband used to say that, Zakia, don't worry, when there is nobody, I will take care of the child, okay? So yeah, so it's over now.
And how do you feel your relationship with feminism changed when you had children? I mean, Rachel, you talk about kind of that not previously being aware of this kind of other layer of prejudice that you kind of, when you don't have children, you don't necessarily think about. Did you become a different feminist, do you think, after you had children?
I don't even feel like it was another layer of prejudice as such. In fact, what shocked me was that it wasn't about prejudice. I think that kind of the way that those barriers for women that arise when you have children aren't about overt prejudice, and that's kind of what shocked me, because that's easy stuff to deal with in a way. The kind of workplace discrimination, say, or the fight for equal pay, they're all very obvious and, to me, just common sense arguments for equality. But when it comes to the home, there's a different kind of tension. There's a whole lot of different decisions, and I found it personally confronting, because I do really value the role of the mother. I do really value the investment of time and attention to the children, but I wanted to retain my own sense of self and still feel that I had permission to have a strong, life that was separate to theirs. I mean, in fact, I use your quote quite a lot, Maxine, in other talks that I've done about children. My children are my children, they are not my dreams. And I feel very strongly about that. I felt it was still separate to what I wanted to do in my own life. And that's what I found shocking, was my struggle to keep that alive in the face of the sheer kind of workload and expectations that come with family life.
And Liz, you've got a daughter. Did that change the way you felt about feminism? Having to actually raise a girl and raise a woman, did that raise issues for you that you hadn't thought about previously?
I think it did. I think it's true that parenting does change one in ways that you can't anticipate or think about. And I was happy to know I was having a girl, but I didn't tell anyone that I was having a girl, because I was aware that I would probably get an avalanche of pastel pink fluffy bunnies and princesses and things, which did happen once she was born. So I was right to hold that off for as long as possible. And people just said to me, like, really panicked, what am I going to do? What am I going to give you? And I was like, well, you give me stuff that's orange or red or green or yellow or brown. And they're like, oh, you're so difficult, it's really difficult, Liz, you're so radical. And I was like, wow, this is nothing. You wait till you see what kind of parent I want to be with a daughter. And it surprised me, I think, when I was going through this stage of wanting to be at home with her and really enjoying it and enjoying this peaceful, lovely time of, breastfeeding and sleeping and, her and I sleeping. I really wanted to stay at home when she was about 6 or 7 months. I was like, I never want to go back to work. I just want to stay here with my lovely baby all the time and just be a mother. Society doesn't value parenting. We don't value mothering. And I've become a lot more, I think, of an advocate of, well, why doesn't this cafe have a high chair? And why can't I get into this building with a pram? What if I was in a wheelchair? You need a ramp, you need a lift. So I've become an advocate, which I think is linked to my feminism in ways that I wasn't before, definitely as a result of having a child. And that's been a big change.
And Zakia, you're a wonderful role model in your father, in terms of the way that you were raised. Has that been passed down to your son and your daughter in terms of the way you parented?
Yes, it does come to them, but I can't ignore that what our community and our society and the media and the games they play, and the power, the want of power in men and boys, that always into their mind that we have to be powerful, we have to be big, we have to be aggressive, and we have to be authoritarian, So it comes like from somewhere into men or boys. you know, even if you try hard to control it or to channel it somewhere, but it is in them, because I have noticed in my son, when he was a teenager, he said, I'm waiting for when I become 18 years old, then you will not say anything to me. And I will do whatever I would like, you know. I will leave your home. I said, okay, it's okay, you know. Because he learned here in Australia that when you are 18, you can go out. You know, in our community, in our culture, we don't let boys go out. We never. They stay with us all their, life. Yeah. And when I said to him that, look, you cannot escape from me because you are only one son of me, and I will stay with you for all your life. He said, oh, he always said, a woman, go. What? Why did you marry to this man? You know, go live with him. But I enjoy parenting. I fight with my son a lot, and he always says to me that you are a feminist. You never fight with your daughter. I say, yeah, you behave, and I will stop fighting. You go clean your toilet, I will stop fighting. You go cook for yourself, clean your dishes, I will stop fighting. But I will not stop fighting if you're not good, Yeah. So, yeah, we have to be, at some point, radical to bring a good change at home, and then in the societies and in communities that are just far back, like in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in India, and other places, that they see women as a very low kind of human. They are not equal, but they are equal. We have to just grab their hand and stand them up right beside the men. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
They deserve it.
Rachel, you have a boy and a girl. Is there a big difference between raising boys and girls? Should we just raise children and forget about gender?
Well, I feel that gender doesn't come into my parenting very much, but I think, yes, I've probably taken that approach, that they are two very distinct personalities, and they're such full people. They're so complex, like every human being is, and I just feel like I'm dealing with two complex human beings. I don't really think very much about them in terms of their gender. And fortunately, I've got two children who don't think of themselves that way particularly either. And, how much that's the way they've grown up and how much that's just them, I don't know. But that helps if they don't, can sort of identify very strongly with their gender. So yeah, that's. I've just taken that approach with them, that I engage with both of them at that level of, being interesting people and enjoying their company, enjoying who they are in the fullest sense. But I've removed certain influences. So when my son was about 3, we got rid of the television. And at that point, televisions were the only screen in the house. It's so different in such a short space of time. Now, I wasn't having to deal with battling my children, their addiction to an iPad or an iPhone, because they didn't exist then, and that was only 13 years ago. But in getting rid of the television, I feel like I got rid of two things that I'm really pleased we got rid of, what we could, which was advertising and music videos. And now I see them, I'm shocked by them. And I'm not prudish, but I'm still shocked by them. And quite recently, my son, of course, being 13, has discovered music in a big way. And he wants to listen to commercial radio all the time now in the car. And it was the point at which he started wanting this, it was quite shocking for me. I'd raised them in this lovely little bubble, the gorgeous community that we're in, and the kind of music we listen to, and then suddenly I was thrust into this world, and I had to suddenly realise that this is the actual wider community that they're in and that they're going to be in, and I better start talking to them about it. So I decided we'll listen to that radio, as much as elements of it pain me, and it's not the music, I can cope with the music, it's the ads and the banter, which can just be so offensive. And I found there was some stuff that, it was so shocking to me how normalised a certain level of sexism was in mainstream media, and I've just had to use it as an opportunity to talk about it. So I'll just, I'll get outraged, and then I'll just have to explain to him why I'm so outraged. And we're in the car, so it's actually really good. They're trapped, and it's a really good chance to start having those kinds of conversations. So, yeah, I mean, the older they get, the more, I suppose, you start having to deal with the impact of the broader world that they're in.
Yeah. Thanks. And Liz, you, like myself, are a single parent, and there are so many prejudices and hurdles that exist when you are, a single mother in particular. What has your experience been in terms of just dealing with society's stuff around single parents?
I've got some pretty weird pitying or concerned looks when people say, oh, what do you do with your child when you're at work? And I say, she's in childcare. But that would be the same. I mean, they don't know if I'm partnered or not, but that was significant. It hasn't, I mean, I've had to deal with some conversations with people about, where my husband is and that kind of thing. And I take that as an opportunity to have a really great socially changing conversation about assisted conception and extol the virtues of Melbourne IVF. So if anyone wants to talk to me about that, I'm happy to. And that makes them more uncomfortable than they were making me. So I think that's very useful. And really, it's if you press people and say, well, what is it you think my partner would be doing? Folding the laundry, feeding and changing the baby, perhaps cooking me dinner, cleaning the bathroom, doing all those things that I'm doing. And they go, oh, no, probably not. And then they go, financially, probably. And that's a real life example. Someone, when pressed, said, oh, I suppose financially. And I said, well, I don't need anyone else's money. I'm doing okay. They're like, oh, okay then. And I think it's just that concept that when you start to unpack it, it's just that, a family is this, and if you're not that, then you're deficient, and there's something wrong and there's something missing, and it must be very hard, and you must be having a hard time. And I'd say sometimes if there's been someone with me and I'm wrangling Clancy in and out of the car and we're trying to do something like, oh, wow, it is really easier having someone here holding the stroller or closing the door or, getting the parking ticket or something. That's great, extra pair of hands. But, day to day, when we were talking about this out the back, it's like, many women act as single parents anyway. That they're doing most of the work in the house and you've just got someone else to work for, someone else's laundry to do, someone else's dinner to cook. And if I feel like eating fish fingers and peas because that's what Clancy's having for dinner, there's no one else saying, oh, I don't want fish fingers and peas. Why didn't you make a nice roast or something, And I feel like I've got to make a lot of decisions on my own as a single parent, which were my own decision to make, and I didn't have to negotiate them with anybody else. But just in regards to what you're saying about the media stuff, can I just make a comment about that? I think it starts earlier than teenagers and music videos, because I'm singing nursery rhymes with Clancy, or we're singing along in the car and I'll be like, Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater. Anyone know the rest of that? Had a wife and couldn't keep her. Put her in a pumpkin shell and there he kept her very well. Right? We're singing this to toddlers. And I thought, that's offensive. I turned that off. And then I am the great storybook censor. So in Harry McClary, with which you may not be familiar unless you have a child 5 and under, there are 5 dogs, Harry McClary and Hercules Morse and Bitsa Maloney. I won't go on because it'll be in your heads all the time like it is mine. But I changed the gender of 2 of the dogs to female because I'm like, why are all the dogs male? What, really?
And it's the classic ratio, isn't it, in most films?
What, 100% male?
Well, or 95% male and 5% female. I mean, you look in children's films, that's the classic. There'll be 10 boy characters and the 1 token girl character.
And she's always wearing pink and has a bow in her hair.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on the new wiggle. So, you know, there's all these messages that we are starting to give our children long before they get to the video clips. They're not even questioning it by the time they get to teenage. I just think this sort of stuff I've just been really surprised. I think, well, I was raised on this stuff, you know, and obviously you can overcome it. But you need to be very vigilant from a young age.
Yeah. Zakia, you have adult children, and you moved to Australia about 9 years ago.
Yes.
So your children came to Australia as teenagers.
Yes.
In terms of particularly your daughter, I'm interested in knowing, I guess, what that change was like from kind of being surrounded by the community at home to, you know, you're talking about your son kind of saying, well, Australian teenagers do this and Australian teenagers. I mean, are there kind of pros and cons of Australian feminism as opposed to, you know, what you were brought up in?
Yes, so they were very little, you know, 13 and 15 when we arrived in Australia. My daughter said that I'm not wearing hijab. I said, oh, so what the community will say then? She said, I'm not wearing hijab. So when I talked to my husband, he said, it's okay. It's not her country, Pakistan. It's Australia. Let her be very comfortable. Just focus on studying. And she just stopped wearing hijab. And now she is doing physiopsychology, post-graduation. And she's not wearing hijab. But we have community's pressure on us. So it's life is not our life, actually. Life is our community and our surroundings pressure over us that force us to live their wishes, their wants, you know. But we cannot leave everything over our community or our people around us. We have to choose the right way for ourselves, you know. So there is a big change in my home. Now I have my son that says that I cannot live with you, you know, for a lifetime. And I have my daughter, she says that I am not wearing your scarf, you know. You like, you just wear it. But they are beautiful human beings. They are. We talk, we share our stories, we discuss problems, we take decisions collectively for us, you know. We help our community. I'm running an organization. They are helping me, you know. It doesn't matter if my son doesn't want me for a lifetime. It's okay. But, you know, parents needs to be a friend with their children. You know, parents around the world should be authoritative, should be guiding them, but leaving them to go and discover. I do that. My husband does that. Go discover, you know, whatever you like, but you have to watch for the values we have brought from our country, you know. We have to watch for the community's way of life too. We have to be very friendly with the new community, you know, and watch, you know, not to do bad things. These are the values that we always discuss, and then don't worry about the scarf, don't worry about the other things that you don't like, it's okay. So, yeah, controlling is not the solution of raising children, good or bad. Just leave them. They are human beings, and they study in good schools, they live in a good country, you know, you just help them, guide them, and just, you know, be a good human beings, be a good, friendly persons. That's it. No, it doesn't matter if boys or girls. So this is my home. We do that. So they are good. They are now grown-up adults.
Come out the other end.
Yeah.
And Rachel, your book, The Divided Heart, includes interviews with creative women who were mothers. People like Claudia Carvin, artist Lily Mae Martin. It's a fantastic book. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to do those interviews and what the process was like? Were there any surprises in terms of recurring themes for these women?
Why I wanted to do the interviews, I suppose, is a bit, in a sense, what I was talking about before, that I find actually that the situation for artist mothers was a really interesting take on feminism as a whole, because it sort of is dealing with those more subtle impacts. Not for all artists. For some artists it's quite dramatic, but in some ways the sort of the subtle things that women come up against in feeling that their twin passions, their children and their art, are very much in conflict. But at the same time, in terms of what I found is, yes, I think the experience was very universal, surprisingly universal, and the themes were surprisingly similar across the board. But it was both of those things. It was that inherent in that tension is not because they were, desperately wanting to do their art and, resenting their children. It was that they genuinely wanted to be in two places at once, and that was the tension and the conflict. So I suppose taking it back a step, for me, I went through art school, and in my final, I had to go through part-time to support myself, so I was working as well. That's when I was the court illustrator at Channel 9, which I loved, my favourite job. But I had to give that up when I was pregnant when I had children, for example, which was a bit sad. But I'd gone through art school and very much known that women were very underrepresented in art history. I mean, that was just becoming clearer and clearer as I went through. And I just didn't really, I suppose, as having not been a mother at that point, I saw the big picture barriers, but it wasn't really until I had a child myself that I could see how easily you can fall silent as a mother, I think, because your needs just do so easily become subsumed if you don't find a way to keep giving yourself permission to be creative, which is one of those things that can just so easily be deemed an indulgence, and who's benefiting, and it doesn't pay most of the time, so you can't justify it at that level. And I think those things are hard enough to justify for any artist, but when you've got this other very important job of parenting, it can really raise that dilemma to a whole other level. My experience of meeting the interviewees, I don't know if there were surprises. I mean, there were certainly really incredible examples, and that's partly what I wanted to do, was I felt like I didn't have those role models of how women were managing to do both these things. There weren't many historical role models, and I needed to start finding some for myself initially, and then when it became clear that this might be a broader need, I thought these can be great role models for anyone who's struggling with this stuff. Yeah.
And it's quite an extraordinary book, I mean, there are producers, actors, writers, artists, and you're right, there are some common themes, in terms of that shock, really the shock of motherhood and the love of it as well, but just that as a creative person to suddenly find that your creative time is not your own and even less valued than before. It's just really great to have it.
Thanks.
Liz, in terms of your things that you were doing prior to having a child, you're an activist, you do kind of go to protest marches and organise, and has that changed having your daughter, or have you brought her along for the ride?
I do when I can fit it around nap time.
Yeah.
And I think that's obviously a big thing. And you're exhausted. I think that's the other thing about trying to get things done. Yeah. You're just tired, like more tired than I think I could just never imagine being so tired as I usually am. And just things being on at times when the baby needs to sleep or the baby needs to eat, or, trying to get a child out of the house at a certain time, to be at a rally that's going to leave on a march at a certain time, and you know, I'm often that person up the back with the pram trying to keep up, the one right in front of the police, which is not my favourite place to be in a rally, I must say, but that's where you often end up because you're the slowest and there's somebody insisting on walking, but I want to go on the pram. So I suppose it's changed how much I can engage and the way that I engage, which of course presents another opportunity for advocacy to suggest to people that they have meetings at times that's a bit better for families instead of a time when most people are trying to feed and bathe and put their child to sleep and that kind of thing, and just thinking about, you know, if a venue is safe for children or if that has a door that can close or if it's on a main road and just those kind of things. So trying to make activism fit me and my child in and other parents and their children, not just think, oh, well, you know, now I have a child, I just can only be an activist about things that relate to children, because that's not really the case. Yeah, so I do just bring her along. I think she came to the first rally with me when she was 3 months old. So I waited 3 months to take.
And is part of that wanting to let her be part of that, you know, in terms of the issues that you know, seeing you do things that you would like her to continue doing or like her to engage with. Is that a part of taking her along?
It is, and it's about that sense of self as well. It's like, well, this is something, you know, I've been an activist, I identify as an activist for a long time. A lot of my friends are in the community. It's something that's really important to me as trying to be a force for change, an agent of social change in the world. And I think I wouldn't feel good in myself if I stopped doing that. And, you know, like people might, they wouldn't feel good if they stopped making their art. You know, when it's something that's part of you, a creative process or something that you need to do, then it can be something that can include your children, include your family. And yeah, I think it's good that she is exposed to those values and those concepts and will start to ask questions about it in time. Yeah. But I think it's important for both of us, I would say.
And Zakia, you founded the Hazara Women's Friendship Network. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, why you founded that organisation and what it does?
Yeah, I used to do the same thing in Pakistan. When I finished here my studies, and then I saw that refugee women are struggling to fit in, and to, you know, communication was the big challenge for them. So I said that let's do something for them, and I started the organisation Australian Hazara Women's Friendship Network, and now we have like 35 women coming and getting the skills of English and computers and learners, driving and citizenships. So this kind, and the most important thing is that I have bridged the wider community with the Hazara and refugee communities. And they come and go as a friend now to other organizations. They get trainings from other organizations. Like we are now feeling part of Australia, Australian, you know, big community. So we're going to protest, we're going to talks, we have young girls, you know, as activists coming on the platform and working together. So yeah, so bridging refugee women with the wider community was the main focus of this organization, and we are successful. I'm very, very proud of that.
Excellent. Yeah. We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about birth. We were talking backstage about this whole thing of, you know, when you become a mother, the first time you really engage with it, you know, as a feminist is being pregnant. The kind of care you get, the way that people react to pregnant bodies. Does anyone want to, I'm throwing this open, so does anyone want to talk about their experiences?
Go for it, Liz.
Oh, all right. I did say before that probably my first experience of parenting was, of course, being pregnant, and then just being put in that situation of, you know, people touching your body because there's another human in it. People just complete strangers, or people you only know as an acquaintance, or your yoga teacher, or other people just having a touch from any angle, or just, you know, that's not really okay. And just I'd have to physically get people's hands and go, no, you know, you can't touch me just because there's another person in there. And I think through the process of you know, birthing education, preparing for the birth, what I regard as one of the most significant things that my body's ever done, is ever likely to do, and how significant this is as an act in your first instance of meeting your child, this first process that affects how you bond with them and all these important things, how people treat you, just like, oh, you don't need to know those things, or just leave it up to the doctor, and still in this day and age. And so I'm trying to do all this research and reading all this stuff by different midwives and Ina May Gaskin and a few other people that previously I would have thought, oh, that's all a bit, you know, fluffy, all those midwife things, it's a bit hippie, I think. But I just realised how important it is. This is, you know, as feminists, we always say, my body, my choices, my rights to decide. And this is a fundamental way in which I think a lot of women aren't given a lot of power in choosing how they give birth and how much they know about it and how many choices they have around it. So I became a birthing advocate and a natural birth advocate and things that I just wouldn't have even considered before. So yeah, and it was amazing. I had a birth that I wanted. It was great. I loved talking about it. You know, I didn't have any drugs. I didn't have any tearing. And it's really possible that you can have a completely natural birth and not tear. And, you know, people act like it's this horror story, like, oh, you're going to go in there, it's going to be pain. So you need to have an epidural, and then you have to have all this pethidine, and then you have to be strung up and all these things. And it's not true. And so I just think, you know, we need to be talking about positive experiences of birth and saying women's bodies are really amazing, and it's a really incredible thing that they can do, that you can walk away from and just feel amazed that your baby and you work in tandem to bring them into the world. It's just phenomenal. So, see, I sound like one of those hippies going, birth is amazing, it's so empowering, and, you know, just stop me now. Someone else say something.
Yeah, see, I didn't sort of mind that so much. The touching, and I found that kind of lovely. But I can understand why, if that's not something you're into, the respect of being asked first is important, and that should be just intrinsically understood, and obviously isn't. I actually really loved being pregnant, and I also really loved giving birth, just because, I mean, despite the fact that it's horrendously painful, and there's just no way of, you know, ignoring that. And similarly, I had a drug-free birth and so on, a very, very long birth with my first child. But it's so incredible. I mean, to recognise that, yes, your body has been created to do this extraordinary thing, and the moment at which you meet that child, I mean, you really can't beat that for an experience. And I suppose for me, in terms of dealing with the hospital, I mean, I just love midwives. I think they're the most incredible breed, and mostly I just got to work with midwives, which was fantastic. But my birth became a little bit complicated, and the point at which we were moved out of the birth centre and into the sort of standard mainstream ward, that's when I realised, hold on, this isn't the lovely world of midwives, this is the world of doctors. And that's when, you know, they start bringing every machine that goes ping and turn the lights on, and that's when you actually really have to start advocating for yourself and your baby. And I think it's actually really, I mean, I know people diss birthing plans and that kind of thing, but I actually think it's really important to have thought about what you want beforehand, because actually in that moment, you're not necessarily in the kind of mind space to be thinking that way. So if you've got an advocate there with you, whether it's your partner or someone else who knows that, no, you wanted the lights down and you didn't want drugs, and then you've got someone who can be saying, hold on, you know, can we keep the lights off, please? And they don't even think of it. The doctors just switch the lights on thinking, you know, it's easier for them, of course, which it probably is, but I think...
They're not giving birth.
No, they're not the ones giving birth, and really, you know, the lights don't really need to be on if you actually thought about it. So, yeah, I'm just all for really thinking it through, really planning, really advocating on your own behalf in that situation where, you know, the medical system is so imposing and so strong, and when you lose your lovely natural midwife and you're, you know, thrown to the mercy of the doctors, it can be quite a shock.
Zakia, do you have positive birth experiences? Or?
Oh, it was long ago. I don't remember.
Sure, you don't.
Did you have a big support network around you when you had your children?
We do have in our culture, when the time of birth comes, so we have our mothers and sisters and aunties and mother-in-law and all sisters, everybody. The room is full with all relatives, and they are staying over there until the baby comes out, So most of them used to have midwives, but nowadays they go to hospitals. Yeah, we do. I had birth for my 2, 3, 4, 5 children in hospitals, but first child died because of leukemia in 4.5 years. And then the 2 children, girl and boy, they born premature. They were very, very tiny when they were born. So yeah, I just remember that moment when my son born, and there was no oxygen. And he was just so little, a premature 7 months baby, and there was no oxygen in Pakistan's hospital. And someone just find a cylinder of oxygen with a little tube, And when my mother-in-law just stayed over there and keep the tube near the nose of the baby until he started crying. Yeah. He was not crying. So that moment I cannot forget. Very, very dangerous things happens in the countries like that. Yeah. So yeah, daughter was healthy. She was 7 too, but she was crying very loud, and she didn't need oxygen.
And is it a joyous thing to have so many people,
my God,
around?
No.
More people to yell at, I reckon.
Just everybody go out.
Do you get the many hands help afterwards?
Yes, this is good. You have your mother, you have your mother-in-law. She was really a very nice lady, and my husband was very good. Very helpful, always. Take care of me and my baby. But there is, in our culture, when baby born, so mother has to diet, and she's not allowed to eat everything. She has to go according to their rules. So now baby is too little, you cannot eat this, you cannot eat that. So that part is not good for baby and for baby's mother. Yeah. So yeah, things are changing now because of the awareness and the education and the TV and the internet and the Facebook. Everything is just now getting globalized, and things are getting good now. Yeah, better.
Yeah. Thank you. I might throw it over to the audience now. We have a microphone on either side, so if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand. Because it's a sensitive topic, we are talking about our children as well as being parents. I have said to the panellists, if there are any questions that they want to pass on, to feel free to do so. So I hope the audience understands and respects that.
Hello. I have a question about, you made a really, really great point about kids' literature and, I'd imagine children's television and all that kind of stuff. What the media that children get exposed to being quite sexist sometimes, and I'm just wondering, how do you manage the tension? Like, my stepson adores superheroes, and I always wonder what the point is at which I ought to stop pointing out all of the really problematic paradigms that come along with that, and let him just enjoy watching superheroes, even if it's really sexist. And at what point I ought to keep pushing past that point to make sure that his eyes are wide open when he's watching it.
Yeah, well, I've got thoughts on that only because my general feeling is that they're going to go for all sorts of things across their lifetime that you find problematic. And the approach that I've taken is to just engage with them on it. So, I was not interested in football before I had a son, but I go to the football with him almost every weekend now, because I figure it's something we can do together, and I can sort of keep it positive. It's about sport. It's not, and whatever goes on in the background of that, we can have that kind of conversation. And I have faith that if you're raising your children with a broad set of values, that you're just modelling all the time, and you're having those kinds of conversations around the table, and that superheroes, Barbies, I don't welcome them, but I don't make a big deal of them either, because they're faddish, they'll come and go, and in the broader scheme of things, I suspect they're not really going to shape your child and the kind of person they're going to be. I think those bigger values that you're just surrounding them by all the time are the things that are really going to count. So, yeah, I try to just sort of, I feel like in making them too big, you're almost, you might be over-investing in them as well, and making them a little bit more exciting than they would be otherwise. I mean, it depends on what it is. But yeah, what do you feel about that?
I'm never going to stop doing it.
I think for me it's about finding something, particularly with my son who's 9, on his level. You know, he wasn't really reading a lot of books by women, just simply because all of the way the books are marketed, they're either marketed as girls' books or boys' books. So I was reading the Treehouse books and the Wimpy Kid and all those kind of things. So, you know, I'm the one that's buying the books. If he wants to choose a book, then he can choose every second book, and every second book is going to be a book by a woman, and he has to read that book to get the next book, you know. And I also enrolled him in a book club at our local bookstore, because I know that they choose half and half. So, you know, he's going and he's talking about the books with other kids, and there's other boys in the book club. So for me, it's about finding a way to engage on their level, instead of kind of just going, why are you reading that? Kind of finding a way to, you know, corrupt them or bribe them, really.
I have a question about the transition, perhaps, that maybe you all or a couple of you experienced when you became pregnant, or when you were preparing to have a child, and the shift in the identity and what that reflected to you about how you perceived being a mother and what the identity of a mother is. I found that before I had children, I kind of didn't have being a mother on my list of achievements. And it sounds really bad, but there was a really big transition for me. And now that I have 2 children, I think, what was I thinking? Like, the disrespect that I had for this identity of being a mum. And yeah, I'm just interested to hear from you, Zakia. You put it really beautifully, that it seems that you already had identified, you could identify with the motherhood and whatever values and qualities are associated with that. So I'm interested to hear what the transition was like for you, Liz, and you, Rachel, as well.
Yes, I said that motherhood was the only achievement for me when I was very young, that I wanted to change things, you know, around me, that the other mothers were not doing so. So when I myself became a mother, it was, you know, a real world of the dream that came true to me, and I put all my heart and soul and my knowledge and to raise them, especially my daughter. That I never thought that my daughter would think that she is a girl and she is inferior. And today, when I see my daughter, she is a confident lady, and she just got married, you know, on Saturday, and I feel like it's a mission accomplished. And I feel very, very proud of myself that I kept my identity too with me, as a mother, as a Zakia itself. And though my community, my culture is hard towards women, but I'm very stubborn. As my son says, that you are a stubborn woman. And I said, yes, you know, it's good, you should be stubborn too, you know. It's a way to prove yourself. Be stubborn. Be very confident to get your rights for yourself. I just taught my son, my daughter, that you always should stand up for your rights. You're not inferior than anybody in the world. You are the same human being, both of you, with anybody else around the world. So yeah, the motherhood is like you have a magical, power stick with your hand, and you putting your heart, your soul, your love, your hard work to shape up a person. And this is, possible. Really, this is possible, and a mother can do that. Not fathers, sorry. Fathers can do too, but they have to be mother first, because we sacrifice a lot. When there was my daughter's wedding, I did all shoppings, I did all cleanings, I did all arrangements, I did everything. And at night I was like I was dying, and in the morning I was alive again. Let's go again, let's go again. So at the end, I'm very, very satisfied. I'm very happy that things are over very well. Yeah, we have to be generous as a mother. Yeah, very generous.
I didn't think somehow when I became a mother that I would morph into a different sort of person, but I think other people around me did, and that was probably more difficult for them to say. In fact, I'm wearing the example right now, which is this skirt. Can you see it? So when I was going to buy this skirt, I was with somebody, and I'm not going to name them because this might get back to them. But I was, shopping, looking at this skirt. I'm like, wow, that's a great skirt. What's my size? Good. And they said, but Liz, you're a mother now. And I was like, yeah. And I'm sure I can still parent while I'm wearing that skirt. And so it's now the parenting skirt. It's a bit of a joke. I call it the parenting skirt. And I'm like, I'm going to parent now wearing this skirt. So I think that's to do with how we perceive mothers and how society perceives mothers and how we're supposed to dress or how we're supposed to act or the things we're supposed to be interested in. We're all supposed to be reading the Women's Weekly and doing craft or something. And I'm also lousy at craft. And people are like, oh, did you make that yourself? I'm like, no, I bought it. They're like, oh, did you make that for Clancy? I'm like, no, I can't make anything like that. I could make her fish fingers, and that's a stretch sometimes. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cultural baggage we have about who a mother is and how she acts. And who a mother is who you are. You are still that person. Yes. You just have children now.
Yes, this is true.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I think the great thing about becoming a mother is I think it is a genuinely radicalising experience, because you are plugged into your community in a whole new way. All sorts of systems are kind of suddenly set up around you, which gives you an interesting take on the way society works. You're an object of scrutiny in a whole new way, which is very confronting. But you also just have this renewed respect for every woman who's ever done this before you, which is such a humbling thing too. So I probably identified with being a mother more than I thought I would. At the same time as very much agreeing with you that doesn't mean I identify with a type. I just suppose I identify with the job of it and how hard it is, and it gives me a respect for everyone else who's done that or is doing that. But I thought that stuff about craft is interesting because there is that whole movement, and that's kind of come up since I wrote the original version of The Divided Heart. That was talking about art and craft and mothering was very new then. The mummy blogger kind of scene was very new, and I at one level I think this is great. Women are starting movements, and so at one level those movements can be very radical. The slow food movement, the craft bespoke, at one level, yes, this is about the kind of the world we're moving into and need to create. At the other, there's an element of a sort of return to the 50s that really bothers me, and just means it's a consumerist movement essentially, and it's another way to sort of confine women and create just ridiculous expectations for themselves and amongst each other.
And competition, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's competitive in its nature, about the best, most Pinterest-worthy birthday
It's all
cake.
about the look of things. I mean, I want my children to recognise the value of the life of the mind. I mean, I think bodies are great. You can decorate them. They can be fun. You know, they dance and it's, you know, that's... and they're a great vehicle for getting you around. But really, I mean... to me, I feel like the life of the mind it's not valued anymore somehow, and that's what I want my kids to care about at the end of the day.
I think for me, I never appreciated just the carer's role. You know, I always think, you know, for me, just being here tonight, you know, I've got a babysitter at home. My daughter's in childcare 2 days a week. My son is in school, you know, and all of those people that allow me to do that, they're all women. And a lot of the time they're poorly paid women, you know. So just that, I think before I have kids, I never really thought about caring, you know. I mean, obviously I'm not a thoughtless person, but that role that we all kind of just take for granted as children, really. As soon as you become a parent, you kind of go, oh, okay, I get it now. We're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. This has been the F Word, and if you've enjoyed tonight's conversation, please check out our other topics. I think there's 4 more to go. Please thank Liz, Rachel and Zakia.